The battlefield was littered with the remnants of destroyed war machines and fallen soldiers. Smoke filled the air as plasma bolts and energy blasts illuminated the darkened sky, creating a horrifying spectacle of destruction. The war between the XLRE Dominion and the United Human Federation had raged for years, but one mystery continued to haunt the XLRE commanders: humans did not die as easily as other species. No matter how many times they were struck by energy weapons, reports showed them standing back up, adapting, surviving. It was as if their bodies changed after every battle, growing stronger instead of weaker. This was impossible. No other species in the galaxy had ever shown such a trait. Yet, time and time again, human soldiers refused to perish from wounds that would have vaporized any other being. The Galactic Council had dismissed these claims as mere exaggerations, but the XLRE knew better. They had fought humans firsthand, and they had seen it with their own eyes. Something was different about them, something terrifying. Captain Elias Carter lay on the cold metal floor of XLRE prison cell, his breathing slow but steady. He had been captured after an ambush on a distant colony world, his squad wiped out by relentless enemy fire. The XLRE had taken him alive, curious to see if the stories about human resilience were true. He had already endured hours of interrogation. Yet, despite the pain, something deep inside him refused to break. The XLRE scientists had tested their weapons on him, increasing the intensity of their energy blasts with each passing hour. They expected his body to give in, to disintegrate like all the other species they had conquered. But instead, something strange happened. The wounds that should have been fatal began to close at an unnatural rate. His body, instead of breaking down, was adapting. The pain was still there, but he could feel a change: his muscles growing denser, his nerves firing faster, his body learning how to resist. The XLRE scientists watched in disbelief as he survived blasts that should have reduced him to ash. This was not normal. This was evolution happening before their very eyes. The head scientist, a cold and calculating XLRE named Vexor, observed Elias through the reinforced glass of the observation chamber. His reptilian eyes narrowed as he reviewed the data. "Impossible," he hissed, his claws tapping against the control panel. "His body is not just healing, it's adapting to our weapons. If this ability is widespread among humans, then they are more dangerous than we ever imagined." The XLRE Dominion had always relied on energy-based warfare. Their fleets carried plasma cannons, their soldiers wielded ion rifles. Their warships could unleash storms of energy blasts capable of turning entire cities to dust. But if humanity was capable of resisting this form of warfare, then the XLRE's greatest strength had just become their greatest weakness. Elias sat against the cold metal wall, his breaths coming out in slow, measured paces. He could feel the energy within him now, the way his body absorbed the damage and adjusted itself. He clenched his fists, feeling the strange power surging through his veins. The XLRE didn't understand humans, not truly. They had seen Earth as just another planet to conquer, another species to dominate. But they had underestimated the one thing that made humans different from all others: their ability to evolve, to survive no matter the odds. This was not the first time humanity had faced extinction, and it wouldn't be the last. But if the XLRE thought they could break him, they were about to learn a painful lesson. The scientists decided to push further. If humans could resist energy blasts, they needed to find a limit. They increased the power, hitting Elias with stronger and stronger bursts of plasma. He gritted his teeth, the searing heat burning his skin, but something was different now. The pain that should have been unbearable became tolerable. His body adjusted faster. The burns healed almost instantly. His cells responded in ways even he couldn't comprehend. He felt stronger. The XLRE guards who watched from outside the cell took a step back, fear creeping into their reptilian eyes. Vexor slammed his fist onto the console. This cannot be allowed. If humans are truly evolving beyond energy weapons, they must be eradicated before they become unstoppable. He turned to his assistants. "Prepare for immediate termination." The order was clear: Elias Carter could not be allowed to live. But as the guards moved to execute him, something unexpected happened. The moment they fired, Elias reacted faster than thought. His body, now fully attuned to energy blasts, absorbed the incoming fire. The Exalari watched in horror as the energy danced across his skin, no longer harming him but fueling him. Then, with a single movement, he lunged forward. The next few seconds were chaos. The reinforced glass shattered as Elias slammed into the nearest guard, his enhanced strength sending the Exalari flying into the steel wall. The alarm blared through the facility, red lights flashing as scientists and soldiers scrambled in confusion. Elias could feel the raw energy inside him now, his body no longer human in the way it once was. He wasn't just resisting the Exalari's weapons anymore, he was feeding on them. With every step he took, he felt stronger, faster, more powerful. He tore through the facility, taking down guards with ease. They fired at him desperately, but their weapons were useless. The greatest war technology in the galaxy had become a joke against him. He reached the communications chamber and activated the emergency signal. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the United Human Federation," he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "To any human forces receiving this message, energy weapons don't work on us anymore. They only make us stronger. I am living proof." He paused for a moment before adding, "And I am not the only one." The transmission was sent. The Exalari Dominion had spent years trying to break humanity. But in their desperation, they had created something far worse, an enemy that could no longer be defeated by their most powerful weapons. The war was about to change forever. And for the first time, the Exalari knew fear. The cold halls of the Exalari research facility echoed with the sound of blaring alarms and heavy boots as soldiers rushed to contain the situation. Captain Elias Carter, once a captive subject of cruel experiments, now stood in the middle of a ruined security chamber, his body pulsing with raw energy. He could still feel the last remnants of the plasma blasts that had struck him, except now, they did not burn. They did not wound him. Instead, they empowered him. He clenched his fists, his muscles humming with a strange force that was neither human nor machine. He had felt pain, he had suffered, but his body had refused to die. The Exalari had unknowingly pushed him past the limits of any known species, and now they were going to regret it. The first wave of Exalari guards stormed into the chamber, their rifles raised, their reptilian faces filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Fire!" one of them shouted, and a volley of energy blasts streaked through the air, converging on Elias. But as the glowing projectile struck his body, the effect was far different from what they expected. The energy crackled against his skin, surging into him, and instead of falling, Elias absorbed the impact. He felt his muscles tighten, his heartbeat slow, his mind sharpen. It was as if the energy itself was now a part of him, feeding him, strengthening him. The guards hesitated for a split second, just long enough for Elias to move. He launched forward with unnatural speed, closing the distance between him and the soldiers in the blink of an eye. His fist connected with the first Exalari, sending the alien flying backward into the metal wall with a sickening crunch. Another guard raised his weapon, but Elias was already on him, grabbing the barrel of the rifle with one hand and twisting it aside before slamming his elbow into the Exalari's throat. More guards poured into the room, but none of them could keep up. The plasma bolts they fired only fueled him further, and with every step, he felt faster, stronger, unstoppable. Outside the chamber, Exalari scientists watched in horror through the security monitors. Dr. Vexor, the chief scientist who had ordered Elias's capture, stood frozen as he analyzed the data flashing across the screen. "This isn't possible," he muttered, his voice shaking. "No biological species can evolve this quickly. He should have been destroyed by those weapons. He should be dead." His assistants exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. They had spent years perfecting energy-based warfare, creating weapons capable of annihilating entire planets. And yet, standing before them was a single human who had rendered their technology useless. If he escaped, if he returned to his people, the Exalari Dominion would face something they had never encountered before, an enemy immune to their deadliest weapons. Elias did not stop. He moved through the facility like a force of nature, tearing through soldiers and security barriers with ease. He could feel the energy inside him shifting, changing, adapting. His body was no longer reacting to the blasts, it was anticipating them. The moment a rifle was raised, he could sense the buildup of energy before the trigger was even pulled. His reflexes responded before his mind could process, dodging, countering, overwhelming his attackers with sheer power. It was not just strength that had evolved, it was instinct. He reached a reinforced blast door and slammed his hand against it. A burst of stored energy surged from his palm, sending shockwaves through the metal. The door, built to withstand orbital bombardments, groaned under the pressure before finally crumpling inward. Elias stepped through, entering what appeared to be the facility's central control room. He scanned the consoles, his eyes locking onto a glowing blue terminal displaying a galactic communication network. This was it, his way to reach humanity. If he could send a message, he could warn them, tell them the truth about what the XLR had done. Behind him, heavy footsteps echoed. He turned to see Vexor standing at the entrance, flanked by two elite XLR warriors clad in advanced combat armor. Unlike the soldiers Elias had faced before, these ones did not carry rifles. Instead, they wielded massive blade-like weapons crackling with electric energy. "You are an anomaly," Vexor said, his voice cold. "A mistake. We have fought hundreds of species, conquered countless worlds. None have ever defied the laws of war as you have. You are unnatural, and for the sake of the galaxy, we will erase you before your kind can spread." Elias smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, stepping forward. "You didn't create an anomaly. You just woke something up." The Accelerate warriors lunged at him, their weapons slicing through the air. But Elias was already moving. He caught the first blade with his bare hand, feeling the electric charge race up his arm before dispersing harmlessly. With a sharp twist, he wrenched the weapon from the warrior's grasp and drove it into the second attacker, who collapsed instantly. Vexor took a step back, his confidence replaced by raw fear. "You can't win," the Accelerate scientist stammered. "Even if you escape, the Council will hunt you down. They will burn your worlds before they allow humanity to become a threat." Elias tilted his head, considering the words. Then he turned back to the console, fingers flying across the controls as he activated the broadcast signal. His voice carried across the vast reaches of space, reaching every human military outpost, every colony, every fleet commander waiting for news from the front. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the United Human Federation," he said. "To all human forces, energy weapons no longer work on us. The XLR tried to break us, but they only made us stronger. I have seen the future of our people, and it is something the galaxy has never witnessed before. We adapt. We evolve. And now we fight back." The message was sent. Across the stars, humanity would hear his words. Soldiers who had once fallen to plasma fire would realize their true potential. The war had changed in that instant. The Accelerate, the Galactic Council, the entire galaxy, they had relied on energy weapons for centuries. But that era was over. Humanity had entered a new phase of evolution, and nothing would ever be the same again. Elias turned back to Vexor, who stood trembling in the corner. "You wanted to know how we survive?" Elias said, stepping closer. "It's simple. We don't just endure war. We become it." And with that, the lights in the facility flickered as Elias surged forward, ready to claim his place as the first of a new kind, the first human truly beyond the reach of destruction. The Galactic Council chamber was silent. The Great Hall, usually filled with the voices of representatives from hundreds of species, now held only whispers of fear. At the center of the chamber, a massive holographic screen displayed the face of Captain Elias Carter, his words still echoing through the minds of every leader present. "Energy weapons no longer work on us. We adapt. We evolve. And now we fight back." The moment his message had been transmitted, panic had spread across the ruling powers of the galaxy. The XLR Dominion, once confident in its absolute supremacy, now faced a horrifying truth: humanity had broken the balance of power. High Chancellor Veldar of the Galactic Council, an elder of the Serac race, sat motionless on his throne-like seat. His golden eyes, always calm, now held a deep, unsettled fear. "This cannot be allowed," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Around him, representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy murmured in agreement. The Exilari delegation was the most shaken, their leader, Vexor, looking pale and shaken as he addressed the council. "You do not understand the gravity of this situation," he hissed, his sharp teeth clicking together. "We subjected this human to every energy weapon we possess, increasing the intensity beyond anything that should be survivable. And yet, not only did he survive, but he grew stronger. If this trait spreads among their people, we will face a war we cannot win." A heavy silence followed his words. The Galactic Council had ruled for centuries, maintaining order through superior technology and the absolute dominance of energy-based warfare. Every empire, every fleet, every military doctrine relied on one undeniable truth: no organic being could withstand the raw power of plasma, ion, or neutron-based weaponry. But now, that truth had been shattered. Humanity had defied every known law of biology and physics. If Elias Carter's evolution was not an isolated case, then humanity had become something new, something far more dangerous than any species before them. "Do we know how this adaptation works?" A deep, rumbling voice spoke. It belonged to General Korvath of the Drek-Kar Empire, a species renowned for its brutal warriors. He was not one to show fear, yet even he seemed uneasy. Vexor shook his head. "No. Our scientists are still analyzing the data, but from what we have observed, human bodies do not just heal from energy damage. They learn from it. Their cells change, their nervous systems become faster, their muscles denser. They are not simply resistant to our weapons anymore. They are feeding on them." The implications were clear. If this evolution spread across the entire human population, the balance of power in the galaxy would collapse. The Galactic Council had always seen humans as a young, ambitious species, a race that had expanded quickly but lacked the overwhelming firepower of the older empires. That assumption had kept them safe. The Council had tolerated humanity's presence, believing that, like all others, they could be controlled through superior military strength. But now, they faced an enemy that no longer feared their greatest weapons. And worse, if humanity discovered the full extent of this ability, they would become the superior force. Chancellor Veldar finally stood, his long robe flowing around him as he raised a trembling hand. "We must act immediately," he declared. "Humanity cannot be allowed to understand what they have become. We must crush them before this evolution spreads." His words sent a wave of agreement through the chamber, but there was hesitation as well. The United Human Federation had already proven itself a formidable force. With their newly discovered ability, the risk of failure was higher than ever. "And if we fail?" a representative from the Zareth Collective asked cautiously. Veldhar's gaze darkened. "Then we will not just be facing another war," he said gravely. "We will be facing our extinction." Far away from the political debates of the Council, on a human-controlled world at the edge of the galaxy, the first signs of change had already begun. Soldiers who had once barely survived battles with the Exilari were now recovering faster than medical science could explain. Plasma burns that should have left permanent scars faded within days. Reports began flooding in from the front lines. Human troops who'd been shot multiple times were standing back up, pushing forward, refusing to die. Their bodies were becoming stronger, more efficient, more resistant with every battle. It was no longer just Elias Carter. This transformation was spreading, and the United Human Federation had taken notice. Deep within a military research facility on Earth, scientists and generals gathered around a secure terminal, replaying Elias Carter's message over and over again. Admiral Lillian Graves, one of humanity's highest-ranking military leaders, leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "He survived energy blasts that should have killed him," she murmured. "And now he's claiming that all of us can do the same?" A scientist beside her adjusted his glasses, bringing up a new series of medical reports. "It's not just Carter," he said. "We've analyzed soldiers who have been exposed to repeated energy attacks. Their cellular structures are changing. They are adapting at an impossible rate. Whatever the Exilari did to Carter, it triggered something that was already inside us. We just never knew it. A heavy silence filled the room. Then, a slow smile spread across the Admiral's face. The Acceleri thought they were breaking us, she said. But they've only made us stronger. Outside, across every human-controlled world, preparations for war began. Fleets were being reinforced. New strategies were being formed. Humanity was no longer just fighting to survive. They were evolving into something far greater. And for the first time in history, the Great Galactic Council, the rulers of 1,000 worlds, the masters of war and technology, finally understood fear. Because now, the very weapons they had used to dominate the galaxy were useless. Humanity had risen beyond their control, and the war for the future had only just begun. The cold vastness of space burned with the fire of war. Explosions rippled across the dark void as massive warships clashed in a battle unlike any seen before. Humanity, once considered a minor power in the galaxy, now stood against the greatest empires of the old order. The Galactic Council, fearing the rise of a species that could no longer be controlled, had declared total war against the United Human Federation. They had launched fleets larger than anything humanity had ever faced. Weapons designed to annihilate entire planets. Strategies honed over centuries of conquest. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had relied on energy weapons, the very weapons that had once ensured their dominance. And now, those same weapons were useless. Aboard the UHF Titan, Admiral Lillian Graves watched the battlefield unfold through the massive viewport of her flagship. The Council's fleet had formed an unbreakable wall, their ships firing endless streams of plasma, ion cannons, and neutron bursts. Any other species would have crumbled under such an assault. But the humans aboard the Titan and the countless ships of the Federation did not fear the storm of energy fire. They absorbed it. They thrived in it. Across the battlefield, human warships surged forward, their crews unaffected by the devastating blasts. The energy shields that once protected Council vessels were now their greatest weakness because their enemies were no longer bound by the laws of conventional war. On the surface of a contested planet below, Exalari forces entrenched themselves in vast fortress cities, their towering walls reinforced with energy barriers capable of withstanding planetary bombardments. Their commanders believed they were secure, that no human could breach such defenses. But as they looked across the battlefield, they saw something impossible. Human soldiers marched through open plasma fire, their bodies glowing faintly with absorbed energy. The first waves of humans had been cautious, testing the limits of their new abilities. But now, they were fearless. The Exalari watched in horror as their weapons, designed to burn flesh and incinerate enemies, did nothing. Human warriors, armed with railguns and kinetic weapons, tore through their defenses, moving faster and hitting harder with every battle. The more energy they endured, the stronger they became. In the Council's central command station, High Chancellor Veller sat frozen, his face pale as reports flooded in. His greatest fleets were being shattered, his armies overwhelmed. He turned to General Korvath of the Drek-Kar Empire, his voice barely steady. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They are flesh and blood. They should not be able to withstand this." Korvath's claws tightened around the edge of the holodable, his expression grim. "We have underestimated them," he admitted. "This is not just war. This is the birth of something new. Humanity is no longer playing by our rules." Panic spread through the Council's ranks. They had spent centuries ensuring their control over the galaxy, believing their technology made them invincible. But now, their most powerful weapons had become obsolete. Entire fleets were being lost without destroying a single human vessel. The Council's greatest warriors were fleeing in terror, their minds unable to comprehend the nightmare unfolding before them. The old order, built on fear and control, was collapsing. And the Federation was not stopping. Admiral Graves stood at the center of the Titan's war room, surrounded by holograms of battle zones across the galaxy. Reports flooded in. Another Council fleet had fallen. Another fortress world had surrendered. Another species had abandoned the war effort. The momentum had shifted, and there was no turning back. "The Council thought they could erase us," she said, her voice calm yet filled with steel. "They thought we were weak, that we would break. but they never understood us. She turned to her officers, her gaze unwavering. We do not break. We adapt. And now we end this war. The final push began. Across the galaxy, human forces advanced, no longer merely fighting for survival, but for victory. They had become something the Council could not stop: warriors beyond destruction, soldiers who evolved with every battle. The fleets of the old order, once feared, now crumbled under the relentless assault. The Council's final strongholds fell one by one, their leaders abandoning their posts, their alliances shattered. The Great Galactic Council, the rulers of the stars, had become relics of the past. And humanity had risen. In the ruins of the Council's once mighty capital, Elias Carter stood atop the shattered remains of the central chamber, looking out over the broken city. He had been the first to change, the first to experience the terrifying evolution that had now spread across his entire species. The Council had feared what humanity would become, and they had been right to fear. Because now, the age of their rule was over. Elias turned to the remaining Council leaders, who stood trembling before him. He did not need to say anything. The war was over. Humanity had won. The old order had fallen, and the new era had begun. The ruins of the Galactic Council's once mighty capital lay in silence. Smoke curled into the sky, the last remnants of a war that had reshaped the balance of power across the galaxy. The great towers of the Council, which had stood for millennia as symbols of dominance, now lay in shattered ruins. The streets, once filled with the voices of rulers who dictated the fate of countless worlds, were empty. Humanity had won. The old order was gone. And now, the future belonged to those who had survived. Admiral Lillian Graves stood on the balcony of what was left of the Central Command Tower, looking over the ruined city. The war had been brutal, but necessary. The Galactic Council had ruled through fear, through the absolute control of energy-based weaponry, and through the belief that no species could ever challenge their power. Humanity had shattered that belief. The ability to adapt, to evolve beyond the limits of conventional warfare, had made them unstoppable. But victory was only the beginning. Now, the real challenge lay ahead. What came next? Behind her, Elias Carter entered the room, his presence a reminder of how it all began. He had been the first to change, the first to survive what should have been impossible. And now, that transformation had spread across the entire human race. Every soldier who had fought in the war had felt it: the growing resilience, the strength that came from surviving energy attacks that once would have vaporized them. They were no longer just humans. They were something more. The Council's remaining leaders are surrendering, Elias said, his voice calm. The few who tried to escape have been captured. The war is over. Lillian exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the railing. Then what do we do now? She asked. We didn't fight this war just to take their place. We fought because we refused to be controlled. We fought because we deserved a future where we weren't afraid. Elias nodded. That's exactly why we need to be careful. Right now, the galaxy is afraid of us. We destroyed the most powerful government in existence. If we aren't careful, we'll become what we just defeated. Across the galaxy, chaos spread as news of the Council's fall reached every world. Some species celebrated, relieved that the tyranny of the old order was gone. Others panicked, fearing what humanity would do next. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed humans were invincible, that they could no longer be killed, that they would become the new rulers of the stars. Others whispered that humanity had unlocked something unnatural, something dangerous even to themselves. And in the shadows, remnants of the old regime plotted revenge, unwilling to accept the loss of their power. On the outer rim of the former Council-controlled territories, fleets that once belonged to the great empires drifted aimlessly, their commanders unsure of their future. Some pledged allegiance to the United Human Federation, hoping to survive by siding with the victors. Others simply vanished, retreating into the darkness of space, waiting for an opportunity to strike back. The fall of the Council had left a vacuum, and power vacuums never remained empty for long. Lillian turned away from the ruins and faced Elias. We need to act fast, she said. We didn't fight to rule, but we can't let the galaxy descend into chaos either. The council was corrupt, but it was an order that kept things stable. Now that it's gone, we have to make sure something worse doesn't rise in its place. Elias folded his arms, deep in thought. Then we build something new, he said. Something better. A new alliance. One that isn't based on fear or control. One that gives every species a say in their future, not just the ones with the biggest fleets. It was a bold idea. For centuries, the Galactic Council had operated as an empire, ruling through power, ensuring that weaker species never became strong enough to challenge their authority. What Elias was suggesting was different. A system where no species was above another, where war was not the first solution, where strength did not mean domination. But there would be those who resisted. There were still factions that wanted humanity crushed. Those who would never accept peace, who saw the humans as a threat that needed to be wiped out before they became too powerful to stop. The war was over, but conflicts would continue. And if humanity had learned anything, it was that survival meant always being prepared for what came next. Weeks passed, and the first steps toward a new era began. Representatives from liberated worlds gathered on Earth, discussing the foundation of a new interstellar alliance. Old enemies became allies. Species that had once fought against each other now sat side by side, trying to shape a future free from tyranny. The process was slow, filled with arguments, tensions, and mistrust. But it was happening. And for the first time in galactic history, decisions were not being made through force, but through unity. Yet, in the shadows, danger still lurked. Hidden in the remains of the Council's destroyed empire, a group of survivors planned their return. They had seen the fall of their rule, and they refused to accept it. They whispered of a future where the Council would rise again, where humanity's newfound power would be turned against them, where the old order would reclaim its throne. And as humanity focused on building a future, an unseen war was already beginning, one that would test whether this new era could truly survive. Lillian Graves stood on the bridge of the UHF Titan, staring at the stars ahead. The war had changed everything. Humanity had fought, had survived, had risen beyond what anyone had thought possible. But now, they faced a different kind of battle, the battle to prove that their victory meant more than just destruction. The battle to build something worth protecting. The battle for the future. Elias Carter stood beside her, watching as the first ships of the new alliance gathered. "Do you think we can do this?" he asked. Lillian smirked. "We've already done the impossible," she said. "Now, we just have to do it again." And so, the new era began not with conquest, but with the hope that humanity's rise would not bring another age of fear, but an age where every species had a future worth fighting for. The war had ended. But the real challenge had just begun.